Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for attending the Intermountain West Drought briefing for March 12th, 2024. My name is Gretel Follingstad, and I am the Intermountain West Drought Early Warning System Regional Coordinator at the National Drought and the National Drought Planning Program Manager for NIDIS for the National Integrated Drought Information System. These Intermountain West monthly drought briefings are in partnership with all 5 states in the Intermountain West region, includes Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. We aim to provide the most up-to-date drought and climate information and connect climate service providers with resource managers and resource managers with one another to increase landscape and community resilience in current and future drought. The IMWD's regional partners include our federal and state agencies and provide information on special topics and projects related to drought early warning. Some of these partners include the National Drought Mitigation Center, the USDA's Climate Hub, and the USGS, among others. Currently, across the Intermountain West, this is the drought monitors map from last Thursday. Arizona is in 48.6% drought with 1.8% at D3 or above. Colorado sits at 10% drought. New Mexico is at 88.2% drought, which is a slight improvement from last month's webinar, with 19.3% in D3 or above. Utah is at 3.8% in drought, and Wyoming is at 21.6% drought. I want to take a moment to thank our 2 guest speakers for today's webinar. We have Dr. John Meyer, who is the Assistant State Climatologist at the Utah Climate Center. He specializes in research to operations to address Utah's climate services, as well as operational numerical weather and climate modeling. John has enjoyed pursuing topics focused on understanding Western U.S. hydroclimate and precipitation changes in both the winter snowpack and summer monsoon seasons. In addition to his research to operations work, Dr. Meyer also serves on the Utah Drought Task Force and is the state coordinator for the CoCoRaHS network. And speaking of CoCoRaHS, we also have Henry Reges, the national coordinator for the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network, or CoCoRaHS, which is located at the Colorado Climate Center at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado. Henry is celebrating his 20th year in this role, and his big wish continues to be for the nation to get involved in learning about their local climates through hands-on measuring of precipitation, observation of hydrologic conditions at their locations, and sharing their passion for weather with their families, colleagues, and those in their communities. I want to give you a quick overview of the snow drought update that was published last week by NIDIS. You can access this update if you scan this QR code. As you can see from this map, we've seen quite a bit of improvement across Utah in particular and some parts of Colorado. However, some portions of southern Arizona and New Mexico continue to be below or well below average. And next, I will pass the baton over to Dr. John Meyer for our drought condition.
Thank you, Gretel. I assume my screen is viewable at this point.
It looks great, thank you.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate everybody's time, and I apologize that we're all working on an hour less of sleep after the time change this weekend, except for a few of you lucky folks in isolated pockets around the country that skip out on the fun. We'll go ahead and get started on our overview of the Intermountain West drought status. A few overlap slides here with what Gretel has already shown, so I apologize for that. As we can see and have already seen, drought persists in Four Corners states and up into Wyoming. However, drought conditions themselves remain in mostly the abnormally dry, where roughly 60% of the region exists above that state. D1 through D3 represents a little over, or I guess a little under 1/3 of the region's drought conditions. So not a tremendously impactful drought at the moment, but pockets where we have D2 and D3 are certainly experiencing drought impacts beyond just abnormal conditions. Drought changes is an important category to consider. I have 4-week class changes on the left and a water year class change on the right. And over the last month, the 4-week class change indicates fairly neutral conditions over most of the Four Corners states, a few isolated pockets of improved drought conditions, and some small areas in northern Wyoming where class degradations of 1 and a small area right around northeastern Wyoming has experienced a 2-class degradation. But overall, fairly standoffish drought conditions over the last 4 weeks. However, dating back to October, when we flipped to the new water year, we have seen a bit of a different signal throughout the Intermountain West. The Four Corners states, again, somewhat of a mixed signal. We have areas of no change and a few more areas of improved conditions, but several areas in northern Arizona, eastern Utah, and south central Colorado that have experienced some class degradations, indicating drought worsening since the beginning of the water year. Wyoming's drought degradation we've seen over the last 4 weeks is a stronger signal, with areas experiencing 1, 2, and even a few areas of 3-class degradations in northern Wyoming. So areas to keep an eye out for as we enter the growing season and ahead of the spring runoff pulse are most likely going to be indicated where we have those yellows and oranges in our water year class change. Gretel has already alluded to our snowpack conditions, but we'll touch on it one more time. This year, all eyes were on the effects of the strong El Niño occurring in the Central Pacific and how that would play out in our wintertime precipitation. California has absorbed most of the brunt of the storm systems over the last season. However, the Intermountain West, like much of the western United States, has seen a near normal to slightly above normal snowpack extending to this time of year. Gretel already has pointed out the few pockets of basins that are slightly below normal. Again, to see numbers in mid to high 80s and some 90s are not too concerning. I would still consider those somewhat average conditions, just a little bit below where we would prefer to be. For me, my eyes are drawn to northeastern Wyoming. Those are the areas where we have enough of a deviation from normal to expect significant water impacts from a lack of a spring runoff as that snow melts. However, the rest of the Four Corners states and majority of Wyoming are sitting in a fairly good spot right now as we wrap up the winter season and head towards spring runoff and into the growing season. Recent temperature and precipitation conditions throughout the Intermountain West. We have 30-day departure from normal temperatures on the left and 30-day percent of normal precipitation on the right. We'll start with temperatures, and we can see a great deal of the region has experienced mostly average temperatures. This is a pretty typical average season over the last 30 days. We have not had any significant outbreaks of high pressure and very warm temperatures that might indicate an accelerated loss of snowpack. We don't have any significant areas of cold conditions that would indicate we're still holding on tightly to the wintertime season. So overall, I would say from a temperature point of view, our transition into the early spring months is looking right now fairly normal, which is good. We like normal. From a precipitation point of view, we start to see a north to south split in how the storm tracks have moved over the region, favoring the northern latitudes of the Intermountain West and skipping out on a great deal of Arizona and the Four Corners region for precipitation. As we've seen, these are areas that have experienced some slight degradations in drought on multiple time scales. However, over the last 30 days, this type of deviation is concerning, but not totally a significant drought pressure on the region. So we'll see how the longer time scales play out. But as of right now, precipitation across the region has been underperforming in areas that we've already seen some slight drought pressure existing. I'll move to evaporative demand. This is about the first time of the year where I'll start considering evaporative demand. During the wintertime, it's not really a critical component of drought conditions. Soil moisture is frozen, we have snow cover, temperatures are low, and evaporative demand for the last 6 months is fairly benign. However, as we start to enter into the warm season, watching evaporative demand trends is something that begins to become informative and valuable. Looking over the last 4 weeks, which is about in the very leading edge early period where evaporative demand starts to be a signal to pay attention to this time of year, we see the Four Corners area, particularly in southeastern Utah and northern Arizona, where some rather significant evaporative demand has been present. Now, keep in mind, these maps are relative to normal for this time of year. So to see these type of conditions isn't necessarily indicative of very strong evaporative loss. Just for this time of year, when evaporative demand is seasonally low to begin with, we have slight increased pressure on the soil moisture and vegetation on the landscape. Nothing too concerning, but something to keep an eye on as we look at short-term drought changes going forward. The rest of the region has experienced fairly seasonable types of evaporative demand. Areas east of the Rockies in both Wyoming and Colorado are experiencing some slight elevated evaporative demands, and portions of New Mexico that may not necessarily fall in our Intermountain West region, but are still in the area, have also experienced slight elevated evaporative demand. Again, nothing too concerning for this time of the year, but something to keep an eye out on going forward in areas that are already experiencing other parameters of drought stress. The NIDIS multi-indicator drought indices are helpful in blending and distilling a fair amount of meteorological, vegetative, landscape type of parameters down into one single index to help us keep an eye out on things. We have the short-term multi-indicator drought index on the left and the long-term multi-indicator drought index on the right. The take-home story here is, from a short-term point of view, the wintertime precipitation, temperatures, and storm track have produced very little in terms of drought pressure in the Intermountain West region. If we look closely, we can really nitpick and see there's some areas in western Colorado and the Four Corners pocket that are slight elevated D0, D1 types of values from the short-term point of view, but overall, the Intermountain West as a whole has experienced very little drought pressure from short-term parameters. However, on the long-term multi-indicator drought index, the pattern changes, and we see quite a bit more region experiencing the D1, D2, and a bit of a shotgunning of some D3 pockets in the Intermountain West region. And that is an indicator of the remnants of the long-term hydrologic drought that is still present from a hydrologic point of view, groundwater, reservoirs, at least big reservoirs, the big savings accounts for water in the region, and some other agricultural conditions have experienced pressure remaining, despite the fact that over the last year or two, some of these areas have seen some significant drought relief from the peak of the drought over the last few years. So a bit of a tale of two drought indices here. From the short term, things are looking pretty good. However, the long-term hydrologic drought remains pushing a little bit on the landscape and the socioeconomics of the region. Soil moisture is always an interesting component to look at for this time of year. It helps us assess the spring runoff efficiency and how that spring melt will translate into either groundwater or watersheds. And from a soil moisture point of view, looking at the GRACE-based satellite measurements of root zone soil moisture, this is the figure on the left, we see A few pockets of those very wet percentiles and those deep reds, the angry reds, existing throughout the Colorado Rockies and down into New Mexico, as well as a few of the mountainous terrain regions of Utah. So it seems like most of the significant deficits of soil moisture from the GRACE satellite's point of view is occurring in our high terrain in the elevated areas, which are still perhaps spring runoff starved from a long point of view. However, if you were to compare this with years past, the amount of soil moisture that GRACE is observing in the region has come back quite a bit. We've rebounded from the drought several years ago, and so the trends are improving. From the SNOWTEL and SCAN ground-based observations, the 8-inch soil moisture conditions around the state show a very west to east deviation. Areas in the western part of the Intermountain West, Utah, Arizona, and Wyoming are all pretty favorable, right around normal for this time of year. Great news as we head into the spring runoff. However, the Colorado Rockies and into the Front Range and eastern Colorado and portions of the Intermountain West New Mexico region are sitting at soil moisture deficits for this time of year. And so the ample snowpack that we do have it as normal will be a little less efficient in translating to things like reservoir recharge and stream flow come springtime. And so that is something that the River Basin Forecast Centers are certainly keeping an eye on. That's a wrap up of our condition monitoring. We'll move quickly into our drought outlook and wrap up with a few slides on looking forward in time. Colorado Basin River Forecast Center issues stream flow forecasts for our spring runoff. This is their most latest forecast as of yesterday. And you can see gauge deviations from percent of average across the Intermountain West. Obviously, not every area of the Intermountain West is covered in the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center, but this gives a general idea of how snowpack, soil moisture, and climate outlooks are going to combine for river stream flow forecasts. We see a split here. Areas that are marked with oranges, reds, and those angry reds and pinks are areas where we're not expecting a great deal of stream flow and spring runoff. The areas of good news are isolated mostly to the central and northern Utah mountains, as well as northwestern Colorado mountains. Everywhere else, all things combined and factored in, looking at underperforming spring runoffs for much of the Colorado River Basin. Much of the area's reservoirs are sitting pretty good from a small and medium-sized reservoir point of view. However, our large savings accounts for Water, Lake Mead, and Lake Powell, which the Colorado feeds in quite a bit of, are still quite low. And so to be looking forward to an underperforming spring runoff for a majority of the Colorado River Basin is something that we will be monitoring going into the spring season as a potential point of increasing drought pressure, at least in agricultural communities. Climate prediction folks have released their, their seasonal outlook. It's rather outdated as we wait another week for their April, May, June forecast. This is their March, April, May forecast issued February 15th. Again, fairly outdated. However, we do get an idea of their level of confidence for how the season will tip as we enter the spring season. Temperatures, most of the Intermountain West is looking at equal chances for seasonal type of temperatures, just like we've seen play out over the last 30 days. A few pockets of Utah and Wyoming are tipped slightly favorable for above average temperatures. From a precipitation point of view, a great deal of the region, with the exception of southern Arizona and New Mexico, are looking at equal chances, meaning that there's no statistical or dynamical evidence that suggests one way or the other will be on either side of average. For my eyes, looking at these charts, there's not a great deal of concern. Average is good, especially for this time of year. However, those below average chances of precipitation in Arizona and New Mexico are aligned right around where we have those D2, D3 pockets of drought. So an underperforming spring season entering the summer season may put us on the path for enhanced drought conditions in those areas. Still yet to be determined. And I'll wrap up with sort of the high-level drought outlook by the Climate Prediction Center. This was released February 29th, so a little outdated, but gives an idea of where the Climate Prediction Center folks believe drought will change And we see the Intermountain West is looking at either drought persisting or no drought. And so I think that reflects the idea that we have pretty average conditions, not pushing one way or the other strongly in terms of drought conditions on the ground. So we'll be looking at how spring runoff pulses translate to water, reservoir recharge, soil moisture, and the monsoon season ahead. That's all I have. Happy to answer questions now or wait till the end.
Thank you so much, John. I think we'll hold questions till the end. And so everyone knows, you are welcome to post your questions in the question box on your GoToWebinar. And now we will pivot over to Henry to learn more about CoCoRaHS.
All righty. Let me see if you can see my screen at this point. Can you guys see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay, not sure what happened here. Isn't that always the case when you're in the middle of something here? Let me close that up. Yeah, we had it working here a few minutes ago.
And Henry, I can go ahead and bring your slides up if you want to do it that way.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and do that, that might be best for at this point. I'll just tell you to move them along. I'm not sure what happened on my end, but apologies there. Thank you for having me today. Again, it's always fun to talk to folks out there and share our passion for what we have with CoCoRaHS. And I'm not even getting your viewing your screen is a miss.
I am having the same issue you are.
I could tell a good story about it if we come down to that, but
Let's see.
Okay, wait a minute. I think I've got something here. Here we go. Show presenting.
Okay.
All right, you've got that up now. That'll work.
I think so. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, did everybody see that? Okay, great. Well, we'll go with this for now, and you know, we can always make lemonade out of lemons. There you go. Anyway, I want to talk to you guys about CoCoRaHS. If you're not familiar with it, we are a citizen science network where have folks measure precipitation in their backyards, and so we, as well as monitoring drought conditions across the Intermountain West. So let's go to the next slide, and so it comes across here. There's our website. If you haven't seen our website before, take a look at that. A lot of good resources there, maps and so forth. New mapping system, which we started recently. And so definitely take a look at that when you get a chance. Next one. All right, so we've got, looking at the Intermountain West CoCoRaHS observers. And so we get about 3,300 active observers across the Intermountain West. The most of those are in Colorado, but we have about 824 in New Mexico. Arizona's next with about 550, 340 in sparsely populated Wyoming, and then 132 in Utah. So we definitely can use more folks out there measuring precipitation, and you can see the dots on where all those stations are. So there's a lot of gaps out there that we would love to fill in the coming years. Next slide. So one thing which we want to talk about, we're going to talk about a couple different things this morning, but or this afternoon, but condition monitoring. So drought awareness is part of condition monitoring. And as CoCoRaHS observers, you're not only measuring the precipitation, but you have a chance to go on our website and put in what the condition looks like of the land that's around you. And here's a look at the drought monitor, which was just shown earlier, but the information does go and is used by the U.S. Drought Monitor on a weekly basis. And then CoCoRaHS observers also report zeros when there's no rain or precipitation, and that's really helpful as well. The next one. And here's a look at condition monitoring. There's our map that we have out there, and we asked observers to report their conditions on Sundays if you can, because that gives the drought monitor folks a little bit of time to take a look at that earlier in the week. And there's a scale bar. I'll talk about that in a moment when we get to another slide. Next one. You can look on these and click on them, and there's a report. So if you go and take a look at the actual website and you pull up maps and you look at the the condition monitoring, here's one from Las Cruces in last year. There's anecdotal stuff you can put in there to give folks a really good description of what it looks like in your area. The next one, and there's the form. So you pull that up, very simple. There's a condition scale bar for going from severely dry to near normal to severely wet. We've got some PowerPoint stuff on the right that you can look at. Tells you how to report these. Pretty easy to do. There's a description piece. So here it says our ponds are very low this time of year. The normal February snow and rains have been few and far between. And then you can click on a report category. And this forms a dot on that map that you saw at the beginning. And again, this is looked at by many folks out there and gives us a kind of on the ground look at what's happening. So if you know you get a chance to do that once a week, we really appreciate it. Next one. So the other thing I want to talk about today, and there's four things, but this will be the second one, our Data Explorer. So we added this to our website back in November of 2023, funded by the NOAA's Office of Education. And so this is really cool. Even if you're not a CoCoRaHS observer, you can pull up any station or your own station, and there's under the View Data tab. And so you can look at the reports, the data reports on the Data Explorer, and you can explore a lot of things. So we're going to go through this quickly. Next slide. So first of all, and there we go. It's customized for your individual station. So you can take a look on there. Here's one for Marathon, Florida, and it shows you a map of where the station's located. Those little rain gauges on the left of how much rain has fallen year to date. There's a calendar on there, and then there's a station activity, which kind of shows you how many reports you've made over time, how long the station's been in existence. So a lot of informational data on this first tab. Next one. And so we then move on to climatology. So we have dials and stuff on here, which will show how close you are to normals, a comparison. And you can look at those and change year to year on that. It's really pretty neat. And then we have monthly precipitation normals, how you compare to normal on the bottom there on the graph. So that's another one. Again, go in there and play around with these. It's kind of fun to look at all this different data and how your station. Boy, I would have loved to have this as a kid or a teenager to play around with my stuff, or even as an adult. You know, we can have that now to look at. Next one. Precipitation summary. So how much has fallen each month? And so there's a look at what has fallen compared to normal, and then we have other maps on here which show date by date as you go along. So that's a neat one to look at how much precip has actually fallen at your location. The next one. Well, we go to, there we go, year over year. So some people have been with the program for a long time, and each of these little boxes here is a year, and you can go and you can click on those. You can put multi-years on and see how you're actually looking year over year compared to other years that you've been with the program. And so it's kind of fun to look at that, especially if you've been doing it for a long time. Next one. Precipitation calendar. So if you're like me, I remember as a kid, we used to get the baseball schedules would come out all the time, and you see the home and away games of your team and so forth. And so we kind of created this little calendar where you can take a look at what's going on with your station. And on this, we pull a yearly calendar up here. Yellow is no data. The green, the darker greens are heavier rainfall. There's different, all different little things you can look at with that. So it gives you a good overview, and maybe you say, oh, I didn't know I missed a date back there in February, and you can go back and fill in from there. Next one. Precipitation distribution. So the frequency of precipitation observations, and so measurable precip accumulation by different categories. So that's another option there. The next one is the observation calendar. So here's a calendar. Again, this looks specifically at the days of the month. And say you did put in a condition monitoring report, that would show up in orange on here, and your daily precipitation measurements would be blue. And if you had hail, it'd be purple. So again, a nice visual for folks to see what fell during the month. Next one. And then finally, you can take a look at observation tables. So you can look at day by day on that. You can click on the left tab. That'll give you a map of what's going on. And so again, all this data is available for anybody to look at, and kind of fun to play around with that. So if you have a chance and you get a chance to go to our website, take a look around. You might find your favorite station somewhere in the country and see what's happening there. Okay, next one. So this is the other thing coming up. This will be coming out this summer, the new CoCoRaHS app. And so we have had an app for a while. It was developed by an observer. They're no longer supporting it. It's on its last legs right now. So we've come up with a new one. And as we started to come up with a new one, we said, what can we include in this? And so there's a lot of different things. There's the basic feature list on the right. And so, of course, daily precip, hail, significant weather reports, those are, people can put those in real time. It goes to the Weather Service and alarms their AWIP stations of heavy rainfall or hail in their area or snow that's falling. And then there's all these other different things on there to access through that. So I'm going to show you a couple of screens. Again, this is not out yet, not ready for prime time, but it will be coming shortly. So the next screen just shows you that's what it's going to look like. On the left, that's when you put your daily precipitation amount in there, and pretty easy to do. If you have multi-day precip, that's the one on the right, so you can do it, put that in as well. Next one. Okay, you can look at all the data. So all the precip reports you've listed over time, that shows up on the app. And so you have a hailstorm going on. So how do you put that? Here's how I can put my hail observation in real time, what's falling at my area as far as hailstones go. Next one. Significant weather observations. And again, these are the ones, if you have heavy rain, hail, or snow happening, you can put that in. And that goes directly to the Weather Service. And then there's there's some more stuff on there. So that's just a quick glance at what's coming out, and that'll be coming out shortly. Okay, next slide here. Weather Talk webinars. So I want to just make you guys aware, this is a great webinar we're on today. We do one every other month. We're up to 88 of them now, or excuse me, 89. This Thursday, if you haven't signed up for it, you may be interested, especially if you have children, teenagers at home, so you want to be a meteorologist. This one's going to be really interesting. We've got our friends here from Northern Illinois University going to talk about what does it take to become a meteorologist. And so I know when I was in high school, I would have loved to have, my guidance counselor didn't have a clue. And so some really interesting information that'll be helpful to those folks. And then we're going to have another one coming up in May on the World Meteorological Organization, so how they monitor climate change at the WMO in Geneva, Switzerland. So we've got a bunch of these lined up for the next year and a half, and they're all recorded on YouTube. If you want to go back and look at them, it's a great thing and a great resource. Next one. Oh, the new gauge. So you may not be aware of this, but we worked with climatic, sorry, pronouncing that incorrectly. Ty Parzybach came out with this new tropo gauge, and it's a little bigger than your typical 4-inch gauge. Runs for about $55, but it's got bird wires. It's pretty neat. If you have a chance to go to our website and check that out, you can find out about getting one of those, especially if you live in areas where you get a lot of heavy rain. Now, I know Desert Southwest, you will probably never fill this up, but I've been told it makes a great beer stein on the side as well in some of those places. Okay, and then precipitation absurdity. Well, what in the world is this? Well, you may have been familiar with CoCoRaHS's March Madness. And not to get in the crosshairs of the NCAA, we decided it was probably about time to change the name before we get served with notice for using March Madness. We were kidding around that they have the copyright on the words March and Madness. And if you notice your calendars this year at home, they go from January, February, April. What happened to March? Well, you know, it's a copyright thing. Anyway, this is our recruiting contest. We try to see how many folks, how many new observers each state can recruit during the month of March. We've been doing this now for about 16 years, and they win the CoCoRaHS Cup. And we have 2 categories, and you can see the cup in the bottom left there. Let's go to the next slide, and you'll see the latest standings. So here we go. As of yesterday, there's the CoCoRaHS Cup. This runs through the end of the month. And so, yeah, Minnesota's running away with it right now, but still plenty of time to catch them. Tennessee in second place. We do it in 2 ways. One on the sheer number of new observers on the left there, and then on the right, per capita. So how many new observers per based on the population of the state. You can see the standings there. Now, some folks are doing pretty good. Colorado and in the one part there, New Mexico as well. I think the slides, when we did the transmission, it didn't translate over as well, but you can kind of see here New Mexico, Wyoming in the other category there on the right. Okay, and so if you guys have a chance, and you're interested in doing something like this, we'd love to have you become part of our network, and especially if you can sign up this month, it'll help your state out. Next slide, and that's our last one. It's a thank you. And so again, thank you for your patience as we try to get this rolling along here. And any questions, we'd be glad to answer.
Very, very great. Thank you so much, Henry. CoCoRaHS is awesome, and we need as many observers as possible. I'm looking at questions, and while I'm looking at questions, I'll remind the audience that they are invited to put questions in the question box. And I also wanted to announce another webinar that NIDIS is putting on March 19th on soil moisture. Seems appropriate for some of the amazing presentations that we've had today. And these are going to be 2 case studies that are located in Colorado. So if you are interested in that webinar, we would love to have you. And I think without further ado, I don't see any more questions coming in. I think we'll close out. We look forward to seeing you next time. I will post the video of this webinar as well as the recap shortly to the listserv as well as on drought.gov. So thanks everyone for attending, and we hope to see you next month.